Okay, the part we've all been waiting for. We actually want to finally sim our muscles. I've just gone and cleaned up my file a bit. I had some random values that I had chosen as I was demonstrating things. So I just went to the muscle properties, reset all of these to default. I will add, actually, I want to change the mass density because I looked it up and the mass density for mammalian muscles is 1.06 kilograms per liter. And we work in kilograms, meters, and seconds in Houdini. So instead of liter, we want that in meters cubed. 1 meter cubed equals 1,000 liters. So if we times our 1.06 kgs per liter by 1,000, it will be 1060 kgs per meter cubed. So it's close to that value already, but I am going to change it to 1060. And I'm going to add here too, if you ever want to have a quote unquote muscle that's actually a fat volume, maybe a belly or perhaps a breast or something like that, the mass density for fat is going to be 919 kilograms per meter cubed. So you can replace that with 919 if you're ever doing a fat volume. Okay, so apart from that, I'm going to actually also, I want to set my damping ratio to 0.1 because it was a bit high already. Muscle constraint properties. On my first tab, I have gone and reset everything to default here, although I already know this is going to be too high. Sure, let me set this to 1. We can always tweak it later. And the other ones are just the attachment candidates, fixing attachment candidates. I haven't tweaked any of the other settings and other tabs. The muscle paint should be fine for now. So actually, this, when I showed in the muscle mirror video where I demoed how to fix issues for central muscles, I really just used a random thing here. I do want my my abdominis muscle to attach to the pelvis as well as other bones. So I'm just going to toggle off enable all. I could delete this node, but I'll leave it there in case at a later stage we find something we need to put in here. I could also bypass it. Maybe that's clearer. I've just gone and recolored some of these. In my muscle flex, I set these right side lines to be relative references to the left lines. And we've got our muscle solver. And now let's also just create a file cache node to cache out our solver, all the results from our solver. I'm going to remove $hip name. I'm going to untoggle Houdini base name on save. And I'm going to call this Minotaur muscle sim. In this case, we want to keep time dependent cache toggled on because we're caching out a sim, so we want all the frames cached. And you'll see that it's going to cache out $f start to $f end. I might actually change this to, I'm going to change this to RF end so that it only caches to frame 70 instead of frame 90, just to speed things up a bit. And I'm going to color this the same color. I pressed C, by the way, to bring up this color pane. Okay, so now we're ready. Let me spacebar F. So I haven't gone and fully tweaked everything yet because I want to get my broad general settings right first before I go in and tweak too many specific muscles. So along those lines, I also want to blast away most of the muscles so that I can just focus on a couple so that I can iterate quickly so that I know I'm happy with my general settings. So let me just put it in here after the muscle flex. I'm going to put down a blast. I'm going to choose, and I need to press 9 for group select, choose muscle ID, and I want all of these leg muscles, delete non-selected. Okay, so the best place in the stream to do this is after your muscle flex, because if you do it before, you might break all sorts of things. So here are the muscles I'm going to focus on initially. I actually want to do my first run without any muscle flexing, just so we have a baseline to compare it to. And instead of breaking all of these things, actually I can just disconnect this. That should, yeah, so now we don't have any flexing. So I'm temporarily disconnecting that so that I can have one pass without any flexing. And I'm going to also do a little trick because I iterate through quite a lot of sim versions. And sometimes it's hard to keep track of what the settings are. So what I like to do, there are different ways of doing this, and I can link to a video that shows some quite handy tips for saving your sim parameters per version and displaying them in your camera. But for now, I'm just going to create an attribute wrangle. I'm going to set it to detail. I only need it to save once. I'm going to say s at sim underscore info. This, it doesn't matter what you call it, just the S is for string, equals, double quotes for the text, and then semicolon to end the line. And I am just going to type flexing. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to turn off muscle to bone. And this is just temporary because the muscle to bone constraints can remove a lot of the flexing and jiggling and things like that. I'm going to start off with it off. It means it's going to sag a little bit, but I will turn it on later once we get a feel for how the different values affect the sim. Okay, so I'll just call this sim info. And we can say no flexing. I like to use little short hands, otherwise it gets a bit long. So I'm aimed to be, it's going to be muscle to bone constraints. I'll just say off. Okay, I'm going to do \n for a new line because I'm going to keep adding to this. If we look at geometry spreadsheet, detail, we'll see it here. Okay. Cool. So typically I would say run a few frames just to make sure that you don't have exploding muscles or your muscles falling off your bones or anything like that. That is very concerning, but it looks like it is more or less doing what we expect. Especially given that I've disabled the muscle to bone constraints. So I'm just going to stop it here. You can also press escape to stop a sim. And now I'm going to go to the file cache and I'm going to say save to disk. So the ones that it has already cached into memory, the blue frames, they'll write to disk quickly, and then after that it will write a bit more slowly because it will have to sim it. And I will pause and come back when this is done. Okay, great. Let's take a look at that. Because the entire frame range is cached to memory, I can just even play it from this, or I can play it from the file cache. So let us play, and this is playing way too fast. So if you click this button here, it will do real-time playback. I'm just going to press 9 because I don't, yeah, that will get rid of it. And I'm going to control click on the bones so that I can see them. So it's obviously it's quite bouncy and saggy, but at least now we have a sort of baseline. Okay, so we can use the muscle to bone constraints to fix some of this, but because I don't want to over constrain it with muscle to bone constraints, I'm going to try and see what I can do to get some of this sagginess fixed. Number one, I can see that this calf muscle has, I can increase the tendon radius, right? And maybe even the muscle ends a little bit. And also, it's weirdly far from the bones, so I might actually decrease the rest length for the muscle end constraints. So let's take a look. I'm going to go to muscle properties, spacebar F because it's somewhere else, namely the origin. I want to tweak this muscle. So select, press A, and I will toggle tendon mask radius, and I want bottom radius especially to be increased. So this is where the axial ramp correction is helpful. You know, if you want to affect the radius at the bottom, you know it's going to be the second one. Something like that. But peeking in there, I think I could increase the top one too. Beautiful. Then I want to increase my tendon stiffness overall, I think. So I'm going to double this. Now remember, this is a multiplier on this. So even though superficially it might look like the tendon stiffness is half the shape stiffness, it actually isn't. The tendon stiffness is 50 times the shape stiffness. So this means the tendon stiffness is going to be 5,000. Okay. And let me just double check what else I wanted to do. Because of this back and forth that we're doing between the origin and the animation, if you don't have a shot camera, you might want to just create a camera that is a nice view. So let's just create one. Maybe click this to lock it to the view so that I can reposition it a bit. And then now when I move, I'll move out of the camera. So to those of you who are new to Houdini, that's a bit of a different way things work compared to some other DCCs. But anyway, so actually I want to look through that camera. So yes, I'll increase the muscle ends on that calf muscle too. So now when I press spacebar F, it will exit the camera. And muscle ends. So let me select, well, first let me select the muscle, hit enter to see if there's a tab that it is already defined in, which it isn't. So now I'll press A. Which created a new tab. Let's do the end regions, display muscle ends. And you can see it's quite small. So let's increase that a bit. Not too much, maybe 0.2. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to shorten this rest scale. So firstly, I want to allow it to compress. So I will set the compress diff to 0, and I'm going to set the rest length scale to 0.5. I don't want to set it all the way to 0 because that could, because the ends are also going to be from this other side. So I don't want it to flatten the volume of the muscle, but I just want it to shorten enough to pull it towards the bone a bit. Okay, let's give that a try. And I'm going to update my sim info. So it's up to you if you can either keep changing the, yeah, so if this info still applies, I'm just going to add more to it. So what you can do is do the same thing, but now instead of equals, say plus equals. So for the first one, I'm going to say equals, and for every subsequent one, I'll say plus equals. So it just keeps adding to it. And I will say, let's say that the calf, M ends, rest length 0.5. Control Enter. Let's check the geometry spreadsheet, and now you'll see that it's put this on a new line because of the \n. I'll just put a \n there too. Control Enter. Cool. So I'll just start off by running this for a few frames to see, and you can see it's already pulling it much closer to that bone. And it's looking a lot less floppy and saggy already. Okay, I'll stop it and I will version up and save to disk. Come back when it's done. Okay, let's take a look at that. That's already a lot better. See, so basically part of the reason why I'm turning off the muscle to bones, so we can do as much as we can in the muscle properties, in the physical properties, before we start relying on constraints to get the behavior we need, because the constraints can often fight against things like flexing and jiggle. So I feel like the calf looks quite a bit better now. But because we focused in on the calf, the other muscles are still a bit saggy. So let's take a look at the full muscles. Because I am thinking it might even be worth, I'm trying to decide if it's worth putting this rest length scale on all the muscles, or if I should just do it for the muscles on the leg. This is maybe the one downside of, I mean, there's no, I can very easily go in and bypass the blast and set the rest length scale, press diff lower, and just quickly see what that does. It's going to be a bit slower to run, but I'm only really interested in seeing how it looks in the first few frames. Okay, so they're obviously sagging a lot. This needs the muscle ends painted better. We're not focusing on the that type of detail just yet. We're just trying to see if it helps to pull in the muscles. And my feeling is yes, for the case of this character, because the muscles are all a little bit floaty. I think it's worth it. It depends on the model, on your character. For more realistic model, you probably won't want to do that, but I do. So I will leave it with the reduced rest length, but I will put my blast back, and I want to just look at my sim again and see what I want to do apart from pulling in those ends. I think I want to start looking at the flexing, actually, because basically a lot of what will, when the muscle is flexed, it's going to get shorter, and it's going to get a bit less jiggly. Now that we have a sort of baseline, let's attach in the muscle tension lines into the muscle flex. And let me just remind myself if I'm happy with flexing of them. I haven't set up this front muscle yet. And I don't think I've set these muscles up yet. But let's just have a look at what we have. I'm not going to be able to do the entire setup. So let's come to this and we can say fixing on. So now we've changed that. So I will change the version, save to disk. Okay, let's see how that looks. Curious to see what's happening with the volume compared to before. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to alt drag to duplicate this. And in this case, I'm going to copy the name of this and I'm going to paste it here. And this is going to just be to read in a different version. So I want to look at the previous version. I'm going to template the new one. I want to see what sort of difference we're getting. So the new one is the wireframe. And you can see what's happening here. I'll just control click on the bones again. So you can see that with the flexing, this calf muscle in the new version where it's turned on is actually pulling up a bit. And it is, I think one can say it's bulged a bit. So let's keep looking. I'll look from the camera. That's pretty neat. Let's have a look at these other muscles. So you can see, for instance, here, you can see how much less floppy they are than the other version, the old version. Here too, they're a lot less floppy because they're getting that stiffness and shortening from the flexing that helps keep them in place. Cool. Have I got this one flexing? And have I got it flexing at the right time? I need to think about it. I think it might not be flexing at the right time. We'll come back to that one. So let's just, more out of curiosity than anything else, let's take a look at what happens if we increase our fiber strength. So I'm going to come to the muscle properties, and I'm just going to do this overall because it's more an experiment than really refining anything right now. So let's try this fiber strength at 20. So I'm going to say in the sim info, I'm going to add a new line. So I'll just copy this part. I'm going to say fiber strength. And in the case of this, where I didn't take a note of what its value was in the previous one, I like to say the previous value, and then I do a little arrow and the new value, which I've forgotten. I think I said it was 20. Double check that now. Yes. Okay, so fiber strength has been changed from 5 to 20. So let's sim that, version up, press sim, come back when it's done. Great, let's see what that did. Oh, wow. Okay, now we can really see what the effect of that fiber strength is doing, right? So it's shortening these muscle fibers. And it's also, in a sense, pulling it taut against the bone. And then it sort of is main. It's not really. Let's look at the very first one. Yeah, so you can see it has got a little bit more volume than it had before, but not all that much. So let's have a look at increasing the fiber volume scale a bit to compensate. I think I'll turn down the fiber strength a bit, but I just did that as an example of what a high fiber strength value is going to do, and so that we can really visualize the effect of this. So I won't bring it back down all the way to 5. I'll keep it a little bit more exaggerated, but 20 is a bit too much. So let's try 10. And I'm going to do a fiber volume scale of 1.3. So let me update that in the sim info. So now I'm going to change this because it was 20 and I'm changing it to 10. And I'll just copy this line, put in a backslash n at the end first. For new line, copy this, paste, fiber volume scale went from 1 to 1.3. Let's sim, version up first, save to disk. Great, let's take a look at that. I will set the other one to 4 so that we can see them both. Maybe I shouldn't have changed as many things because now we're not really comparing apples to apples anymore. I will switch these two around though. Okay, that's a bit easier. Okay, so now the wireframe one is the new one with the fiber volume scale at 1.3, but the reduced fiber strength. So you can see it hasn't contracted as much, but it has bulged a bit more. Okay, so that's great. Probably a bit excessive. Let's have a look. Although this muscle is quite bulgy to begin with. Okay. So I went ahead and tweaked some settings a bit to get a closer result to what we want. I don't want to spend hours recording every step of my simulation tweaking. But what I did that made quite a big difference was I increased the end region slightly overall. That made quite a big difference to how sort of floppy the muscles were around the tendon muscle end region. I've also increased the tendon radius for a bunch of these muscles, as well as I painted in a this tendon and I painted in this region for the muscle tendon and then added it to my attribute remap that will create the muscle end mask from the tendon mask. So it's one of the muscles specified. And then I also played with the activation attributes a bit. I added some baseline default tension values to some of the muscles that felt a bit too loose, just to give them a bit of tension for the entire time. And I also added a new tension line that matches the sartorius muscle. So I just called the line L sartorius. And that's because the sartorius muscle, which is this one that's sort of diagonal-ish, has a tendency to sort of flop a bit, not flop, but flop away from the muscles. And so I wanted to control its tension with its own line. And I wanted to um, basically, in order to stop it from flopping away, we wanted to shorten, right? And in order to get it to shorten, we needed to contract. And so I'm actually getting a pretty good result there now. I can show what I have. You see this muscle is quite nice and tight. I think I might add a bit of sliding. One thing that's bugging me a bit is that, where's a frame? That's good. The tendon regions seem to be stretching a bit. And I don't recall, don't know if you recall, but I said a few videos ago that if you have your tendons stretching, what you can do to help that out is to increase your tendon mass density. So let's try that and see what it does. Let me just double check that I have this cached out. That these match. They don't quite match, so let me just cache it out quickly. Cache to disk, I mean, it's already cached to memory. So this should be quick. Great. Okay, so now let us come to the muscle properties, and I'll do it for all the muscles. I'm going to increase the tendon mass density. Let's try 3, see what that does. And I'll keep the previous version in wireframe templated view. You can see that's already keeping the muscles quite a bit tighter. It's quite promising. Yeah, if you look here, whoops. Okay, that was just a viewport issue, I think. For those of you new to Houdini, the left and right arrow keys on your keyboard jump forward and backwards. So look at this. This edge, I think, corresponds to this one. So look how much less stretching we're getting now that we have increased our tendon mass density, and how that's caused these muscles to actually come in a bit more tightly and sag away from the bones, but less. So all of this is done without the muscle to bone constraints on, remember? And we will still eventually have our muscle to bone constraints on just for the final polish. But the more we can get in the muscle properties, the less we have to dial up our muscle to bone constraints so high that it's going to kill the muscle shapes, really, like the flexing and the jiggling. So I'm pretty happy with this. I think the next step is going to be to increase the substeps, just to get a little bit more fidelity. That will also help with the stretching type thing. But I'm actually quite impressed by how much just the tendon mass density helped. I think it's helped in a similar way to what the substeps can do. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let me cache that out. Write it to disk, I mean. And let's try substeps now, see what that does. This will make it a little bit slower, but pretty sure it's going to be worth it. That's also why sometimes I hold off a bit on increasing the substeps until I've dialed in a bunch of other values so that I can get a quick dial in before getting it to be very slow. Yeah, you can see that's also made a difference. It's not tightening the tendons as much as the previous one did, but it seems to be tightening it overall. But maybe I'm just on a bad frame for. Actually, I'm wrong. It does look like it's tightened the tendons too. Yeah, okay. I'm going to write out the rest of the sim and come back. Okay, let's compare that with the previous one. Yeah, it's quite subtle. I feel like that tendon mass density actually did a lot of that for us. I definitely see an improvement with the substeps, but not so great that I'm going to keep it. I'm going to reduce it back to 2, partly just so that we can get through this faster. But at the end, when I do my final simulation, I'll probably crank it up again. Okay, so that's the substeps. But let's actually have a bit of a look at what else we can change. I'm quite happy with how I've fixed the sort of floppiness. We still have a fair amount of jiggle, probably way more jiggle than we want. But because the muscle to bone constraints kills that jiggle, but I'm not going to try and tweak my muscle properties at this point to reduce that jiggle. I'll wait until I have my muscle to bone constraints on before I try to make that more subtle. But I am quite happy with how nice and tight the muscles are. Okay, so one thing I'm not so happy with is how the muscles are not really staying together. So I think the muscle to muscle constraint needs to be increased. I think, well, this was quite extreme. And I partly did that because I wanted to show what it was like with a low value. But now let's take a look at a higher value. I'll leave that one. And let us play. I prefer relying on the muscle to muscle constraint to the muscle to bone constraint because to me, the muscle to muscle constraint feels a bit more like what the effect of the fascia on the muscles has, especially when you have, like on the upper leg, all the muscles that are sort of packed together, their connections can then help to form a sort of a singular body, a singular mass. And that's nice to maintain jiggle. With the calf muscles, the muscles on the lower legs, there aren't as many, in this model at least, next to one another. So we might have to rely a bit more on the muscle to bone constraints to keep that in place. Let's have a look. Whoops. Other way around. Yeah, we can see that those are closer together. Not drastically closer, but they also aren't drastically far apart. This little situation, I suspect, is a penetrating point on the first frame. Am I right? No, I'm not right. It's penetrating point at another point. At another point in time that is probably getting trapped. Increasing substeps will probably help with that. Okay, what I'm gonna do is, oh, there. Oh no, it is a first frame. Yeah. If we even turn on the collisions, disabled collisions, going to wireframe mode. Don't know why it's not showing. Yeah, okay, I'm not entirely sure why that isn't showing. Oh, is that? No, that's another one. But it does seem to be what's causing that issue. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. But if I fix it on the T-pose, it should fix it in the simulation. But what I'm thinking is I want to try decrease my damping and see if that helps keep them together more. So I'm going to decrease it by a factor of 10, which is generally what you want to do with damping. Values. Did I cache that out? I think I might have forgotten to cache it out. Oh well, let's see how this looks. Okay, let's compare that. It's definitely made quite a big difference. I think it's affecting how all the muscles are moving together. I'm going to write this to disk. I actually want to, out of curiosity, I'm going to try reduce the rest length scale and the compression stiffness on the legs. So let's enter this viewport stage. Select the leg muscles, press A, go to muscle, compression stiffness, let's try 0, rest length scale, let's try 0.5. Let's see how that looks. And this, again, this is because these muscles are quite far away from one another in the T-pose. If your muscles are packed more closely together in the T-pose, you're going to be less likely to want to do this. I'm going to have my others displayed. Yeah, it seems to be pulling them a bit closer together. It's quite subtle. Perhaps I don't want it to go too far, so I think I'll leave it at that. Okay, let's do. Okay, I'll write this out. Okay, I'm going to. I think it's time to turn on the muscle to bone constraints, and I think let's try a little bit less subtle of a stiffness value, and let's see what that looks like. I have got my old sim on in the template view. Let's go to the camera. The thing that I'm going to expect to see the most, the effect of the muscle to bone, is reduced jiggle, although maybe the value is subtle enough. Maybe the strength of the muscle to bone is subtle enough that it won't be too bad. Okay, let's look. Yeah, that feels a lot tighter. Also just my imagination. Let's preview the previous sim. There is still maybe a bit too much jiggle in the in this leg. Maybe my muscle to muscle constraint damping was a bit too low. Or should I rather do my shape stiffness? Let's increase the muscle to bone strength a bit. So when I say strength, I mean stiffness. Let's try a value of 8. Have I forgot to write it out? Oh well, I'll write it out this time. Okay. Yeah, that really got rid of that little jitter in the leg. Okay, I'm quite happy with this as a fairly rough first pass. In the amount of time that I've spent on it, I'm quite happy with what I've achieved. I think let's have a look at all the muscles and see how they look. I will cache that out and get back when it's done. Okay, the simulation is done. As you can see, when the full muscles are simulated for this frame range, it uses up too much memory to keep it all cached to memory. So just as well that I cached it to disk. Let's play it and have a look at, well, I guess this camera is a bit too narrow. Let's look like this. Okay, so something a bit weird is happening in the belly region. I think problem number one is that there's nothing for those muscle ends to attach to. And I might want that belly cavity to be a bit more fatty than muscly. I'm also thinking this region needs a better tendon mask. And maybe we want some slide. I think part of what's going on here is that we want muscle to muscle sliding constraints on this belly cavity. I think that's going to make this a bit less jerky. Yeah, that's my suspicion. Let's look at the back. Typically, these types of muscles and these muscles we want to allow to slide, especially in something like a quadruped. I don't know if there's enough motion happening in the back for it to really be obvious in this case how it's needed. I'm also tempted to give this glute a bit of a bulge to get that nice bulgy butt action that you expect from a ripped minotaur like this. So yeah, let me implement some of those ideas. So firstly, I said I want muscle sliding in basically, I'm just thinking because we have constraints in both directions here. So we want both sets of constraints to slide. I'm going to just see if I select all of the muscles and set their sliding rate, if that helps. Although, do I have something specified for them already? Let's have a look. I do. So let's try a slide rate of, let's try it at 1. We can always bring it back down. Does that include the belly? No. Does the belly have one? Enter. Okay, so let's do one. So let's select belly and these obliques. Hit A. Muscle to muscle. Slide rate 1. I think my best bet for okay, I'll wait. I'll hold off on fixing that looseness there. I want to add a bit of bulge to the butt. So the line that we want is going to be that back hip. So let's, whoops, select that. Press L to link it. Select the line. Enter. Let's see what the default settings do. Yeah, it's activating pretty nicely, actually. So let's go to muscle properties. Entity. Spacebar F. There we go. Okay, so select the gluteus maximus, press A, and I'm going to take the fiber volume scale and set this to, I know I said not to push it too far, but let's see what happens when we go for a nice big value like this, because this is a bit of a cartoony character and I want to exaggerate that butt a bit. Actually, while we're on this, I want to paint the tendon region because it needs to connect a bit more on this spine end. I'll just use my visibility, 9, muscle ID, select, enter, muscle paint, and make this area tendony. Maybe this can be a bit of a bigger tendon. Normally I would do this with the radius attribute, but I'm painting it already on the other end, so I might as well. Smooth it a bit. Excellent. And I want to add it to, actually, let me turn off the visibility again. I'm going to add it to the group of muscles that I grab. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and select it, and that should add it to the group. Great. See the muscle and mask. Yeah, that looks like what I'd expect it to do. Oh, I wanted to make the belly a little bit lighter. Yes, lighter. And so I'll make the mass density for the belly that of fat, which I believe I said was 919. And what else can I do? Maybe I will decrease the shape stiffness to make it a bit more jiggly. Let's try that. Let's resim it with those settings. I think what I'm also going to do is I'm just going to sim with the 1/2 for now. Could bypass that. Don't want to risk breaking the muscle flex. I think it is safe. Let's just try it. Okay, it seems to be working. So I'm going to stop it and cache to disk. Okay, let's have a look at that. And we see in this case, half the muscles is uses a little enough memory that we can cache the entire frame range to memory. But we've cached it to disk, so we might as well look at that. And I'll turn off the ends preview. Let's have a look at that. We still have funny behavior here. I think partly it's actually that these obliques are contracting way too much. Yeah, I wanted it more to be contracting if in a situation where it bends over. So I'm trying to decide if I want to turn off the flexing or just reduce the fiber strength. What we are seeing compared to the previous version is it's now allowed to slide a lot more, right? You see before it was really sort of trying to pull it and struggling a bit. And I feel like this one, you've got that slide. Okay, so I think the easiest for this exercise is just to turn off the activation. But if you were in a case where that isn't a viable solution for you, you might want to reduce the fiber strength. Namely, well, it's on. Do I have it specified for? No, you'd have to specify it for those muscles specifically, but you'd want to reduce this fiber strength. And your But I think part of the problem is just that this activation is not accurate for the motion at all. You'd be expecting it to be fully tensed in a much, basically when he's bending over to the side. So that's the bigger problem than the fiber strength. So let's, I mean, I can just take this tension line. Let's have a look at where it's. I'm just going to say something like that. Let's see. Yeah, that looks a lot subtler. Maybe that's a bit ridiculous. Okay. Was there anything else that was bugging me? I never painted that. Not that it was actually showing, the effect wasn't that bad, actually, to my surprise. But if he starts doing more with his upper body, it might not be as nice. Okay. And I also just want to add it to this group. Hold on, Shift. Oh, I need to press 9. Attributes, muscle ID, Shift, click, Enter, end mask. That looks good. Okay. Let's sim that and see how that goes. So I ran the simulation. Let's take a look. It's like there's quite a nice jiggle in the belly, which I like. I don't like how these muscles are separating. I'm going to fix that with the muscle glue. I also don't like what's happening here, and I think that's due to the rest length being less than 1. So I will restore the rest length to 1 on these pecs. I think I will also add a muscle glue between the 2 pecs, because technically it is one muscle just with sort of separate heads. So we really don't want any separation. So the thing with muscle glue is, unlike muscle to muscle, the main differences are we have no control over the stiffness at all. The stiffness is basically as high as you can possibly have stiffness. So muscle glue is as stiff as you can get. And instead of it being one line from a point to a surface, it's multiple lines from each point. It's a Vellum glue constraint. So you wouldn't want to have it between most muscles. It's designed for places where you have pretty stiff muscle attachments, like for instance, where central muscles attach is a typical place to put Vellum glue. I'm going to put it here because there's no bone for these muscles to attach to as ends. So I want a nice stiff connection for them somewhere, and I don't want this gaping at all. And also because these muscles should be continuous, there shouldn't be a stretch between them. I'm going to glue those together too. And you don't need to paint the glue mask on both sides. You can just paint one side. So the first thing I'm going to do is just fix the rest length on this. So I will enter, spacebar F, escape, zoom out, spacebar F, hide the bones. Okay. So let's select this. It's in the other one. There's this one. I want no, it's muscle ends. I want to set the muscle ends rest length scale back to 1 for this one. And the compression stiffness, I'll leave the compression stiffness at 0. Okay, and then let me paint in some glue values. So I'm going to go to the muscle glue attribute over here, and I want to glue this region here. Stop them from separating at all so that it behaves more like one single muscle. Okay, so there are only two things you can control for the muscle glue. That is the mask for the muscle glue and the muscle to muscle tab, the glue candidates. Those are the two parameters, or I guess this isn't a parameter exactly, but the two attributes you can control. And now let's paint these edges here. Whoops. Something like that. And here. Over here. And let's do this one. This one. Okay, let's go to the first frame. So go to our muscle solver. I'm going to go to the guides tab. I'm going to turn on attachment constraints, muscle to glue. So this isn't enabling it. This is just to visualize it. So it will be enabled no matter what. And now you can see these glue constraints. And if you zoom in, you see from this one point, there are multiple constraints created to the neighboring muscles. Okay, that looks promising. So I'm going to sim that. Turn this off first just to save a bit of memory there. Okay, let's take a look. It's still pulling it a little bit more out of shape there than I would like. I think maybe the trick would be to remove the muscle ends in this region. We are seeing a bit of a tug of war going on here between this muscle glue and these bones. So this is the downside of using muscle glue. But overall, I'm pretty happy. These, you see, are sticking to that abdomen, the rectus abdominis, a lot better, which I like. I'm pretty happy. I think hopefully this was enough of a demonstration to get an idea of how to iterate through the sim process. It can still obviously do with a lot of refinement. We need some animation, some decent animation on the arms to really hone in the arm muscle settings. And I haven't perfected any of the settings or the firing or any of that, but it is hopefully a good enough approximation to give an idea of how it all works. In the next video, we will look at some post-processing tips for the muscles.